The camp was supposed to be empty. That's what they told me when I signed the logbook and carried my pack down the dirt road. The cabins leaned with age, their paint peeling into pale flakes, the windows staring blankly like hollow eyes. Even the air felt still, heavy with pine and smoke that wasn't there. I set my lantern down on the wooden steps, listening to the forest. No crickets, no owls, not even the wind moving the branches. Just silence, thick and pressing. The kind of silence that makes you hear the soft hum of your own blood. That's when I noticed the shadows. They weren't cast by my lantern, but they moved along the cabins anyway, slipping from wall to wall like they were waiting for me. A door creaked open somewhere, even though I was alone. I never should have stayed. I never should have opened that cabin door. The air was damp, early autumn. The fog clung low to the fields. I drove down the narrow dirt road, tires crunching over loose stones. The cabin appeared through the mist. Dark wood, warped by years, leaning slightly as if listening. And there, on the porch, the lantern glowed. Soft, golden light flickering against the chill. No smoke rose. No one had touched the place for decades. Yet the flame moved as though breathing. I paused, feeling the hum of quiet beneath my skin. I stepped closer. The wood beneath my boots moaned. Cold air swirled around the lantern, carrying the faint smell of charred pine. It didn't burn hot. It didn't burn at all. Just existed. The door hung open on a single rusted hinge. I could see the shadows of the room beyond, stretching long and slow. The smell of smoke grew stronger as I leaned forward. It wasn't angry or sharp. It was soft, clinging like a sigh that had waited decades to be noticed. I wanted to look away, yet the light drew me in. The wooden floorboards groaned under tentative steps. Each one echoed in the hollow space, a rhythm that didn't belong. Inside, the room was empty. No fire, no warmth, no recent footprints. Just a lingering scent of smoke, curling into the corners as if it had memory. A curtain stirred despite still air. The pale light of the lantern spilled across the room. Shadows moved. Not for me. Not entirely. I crouched by the window, fingertips grazing the cold sill. The glass was fogged, brittle with age. Outside, the mist pressed close, silent, watching. I could hear the soft rustle of leaves through the fog. Or maybe something else. A step, slower than mine, waiting behind a veil of gray. The lantern's flame pulsed. Not with wind, not with touch. It responded, somehow to me. My breath caught. I leaned in and the smell of smoke thickened. It was older than the cabin, older than the forest. It tasted of forgotten nights and whispered secrets. A draft slid through the room, brushing my neck, cold and knowing. The shadows pulled in the corners. Shapes pressed lightly against the walls, moving without sound. I whispered to myself, though my voice was too small even for the room. "You're empty," I said, but the cabin didn't answer. It only breathed. I traced the walls with a tentative hand. Every surface was cold, coated with dust, but the faint heat of smoke lingered where no fire had burned. The lantern flickered again, and in that split second, I thought I saw a figure in the corner, tall, still watching. Then nothing, only the faint hum of the flame and the silence that pressed against my chest. I wanted to leave. Every instinct screamed to run, but something held me, soft yet heavy, in place. I felt eyes, though no eyes could exist here. I felt breath that wasn't mine, warm and hushed against the nape of my neck. Time didn't move, or maybe it did. I couldn't tell. The fog outside shifted, curling through broken windows like smoke escaping a long-dead fire. The lantern's light stretched, bending across walls, across memories. It seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I whispered to it, a name I didn't know, a name that felt familiar. The flame danced, and then suddenly it dimmed. Silence returned. The cabin exhaled. The smell of smoke faded into cold wood. The fog rolled away slowly, reluctantly, as if it had been holding on to watch me. The lantern still rested on the porch when I stepped outside. Its flame small, steady, alive. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. Some things wait. Some things simply remain. I walked back to the road. The mist swallowed the cabin behind me. The smell of smoke lingered on my clothes, faint, impossible to shake. and in the quiet, I realized I hadn't felt truly alone. Not here, not ever. The morning fog hung low over the clearing. Cold air pressed against my cheeks, carrying the faint scent of wet pine. The path to the cabins was overgrown, brushing against my legs, soft and sticky with dew. I reached the first cabin, wood grayed by decades, splintered at the edges, leaning as though tired. Inside, the rows of bunks stretched, narrow and still. And yet, each mattress held a deep impression. It was subtle at first. A dip here, a curve there. The sheets were thin, yellowed, but pressed as if someone had just lain down. I ran my fingers over fabric. Dust rose, dry and cold. The imprint didn't fade under my touch. I walked down the aisle of bunks. Soft footsteps echoed behind me. Though I was alone, the air smelled faintly of soap and with polish. Though years had passed since anyone cleaned here, I could almost hear whispers, carried on a breeze that didn't exist. Some of the bunks sagged more than others. I thought I saw a handprint pressed into a pillow. But when I leaned closer, nothing remained. Only the deep hollow of the mattress, shaped by bodies long gone. No names, no belongings, no records. Decades of absence, yet the space remembered. The window panes were streaked with grime. A pale light slanted in, painting the dust motes like tiny ghosts. I could see the fog outside curling around the trees, slow and patient. Inside, the shadows of the bunks leaned against each other, waiting. I crouched beside one of the deepest impressions. The mattress gave a soft sigh under my palm. A draft slid along my neck, cold, carrying a faint metallic tang. Somewhere, far away, a board shifted. Or maybe it wasn't the cabin. I moved down the aisle slowly, careful not to disturb the air. Each bunk seemed to hold a presence. A pause in the breathing of the room. A hum that throbbed faintly beneath the floorboards. I felt a weight on my chest, not heavy, just aware. In the far corner, a bunk sagged sharply, more pronounced than the rest. I hesitated, hand hovering above it. The smell of oval rose, mingling with cold dust. I wanted to imagine a child curled here, asleep, innocent and warm. But it wasn't imagination. It was memory pressed into the fibers of the mattress. A curtain twitched. The fog outside pressed closer, pale and relentless. I felt eyes in the corner of the room, too still to blink. I stepped back, heart shallow, but curiosity held me. Every surface, every hollow, whispered of long-ago nights and soft conversations. I leaned into one of the bunks, fingertips grazing the sheet. It gave slightly under my touch, then stiffened. The air thickened, faint static prickling my skin. Somewhere, I thought I heard a soft exhale. Not mine, not anyone's I could name. I moved through the room like a ghost myself. The impressions followed, unmoving but alive. A hum beneath the boards, a rustling of fabric that wasn't wind. The cabin had stored something. Presence, memory, longing, I couldn't tell which. I paused at the doorway. One last glance down the rows of empty bunks. The pale light made the depressions glow faintly. I smelled the cold wood, the faint soap, the dust that hadn't moved in decades. I realized I hadn't been alone for a long time. Not here, not ever. Outside, the fog swallowed the cabin. The impressions lingered in my mind, each curve and hollow a quiet question. The path back felt longer, heavier, as if the room exhaled behind me. And though the wind carried nothing, I could feel the faint weight of bodies that had never left. I didn't look back, but I knew they were still there. The fog had not lifted. It pressed against the windows of mess hall, pale and slow, curling into the corners. The air smelled faintly of stew. I stepped inside. The room was long, tables lined in quiet symmetry, polished with dulled by dust. A spoon rocked gently on one of the tables, back and forth, as if nudged by invisible hands. I froze. The hum of the building was low, almost respectful, almost alive. The scent of stew mingled with mildew, thick and clinging. I leaned closer to the table, fingertips brushing the cold wood. The spoon stopped. The kitchen doorway lay open at the far end. Shadows pooled there. A faint whisper floated through, low, breath-like, not words I could catch, not shapes I could name. I moved slowly. Each step pressed against the wooden floor, quiet, careful. The pale light from the windows glanced across the tables, picking out crumbs and scratches that hadn't been made yesterday. I smelled the stale soup again. It was warm, familiar, wrong. The whisper came again, soft, waiting. It brushed against my ear, though no one was near. I wanted to answer, to speak, but my voice had vanished. I could only breathe. Slow, shallow. A chair scraped lightly, nudged forward, but no one sat. The spoon rocked once more, faster now, tilting with an impossible rhythm. The room seemed to pulse with a presence I could feel, but not see. Cold air swirled along my neck. Static prickled my arms. I leaned closer to the doorway. The kitchen lay in shadow. I could make out the sink, empty, faucets dry. Pots hung still on the walls. And yet, I felt it. Someone or something watching, listening from the darkness beyond. The whisper became a soft hum, not language, but a vibration in the chest. I pressed my palm to the doorway frame, wood rough and cold. The air thickened. The smell of old stew sharpened, tangy now, almost metallic. I tried to step back. The room stretched. The shadows deepened. Tables seemed longer. Chairs leaned closer, silently. The spoon still rocked. I realized it was almost inviting me, or perhaps warning me. A draft moved past my ear. I caught it. Smelled faint garlic, onions, herbs I hadn't seen in decades. The whisper rose, slightly, closer, and I felt breath, warm and near, brushing the back of my neck. I could not turn, could not see, could not name it. The spoon tipped completely, clattering softly against the table. Silence fell heavier than before. The fog outside pressed against the windows, pale and relentless. I could feel the hum lingering beneath the boards. The room had not exhaled. I stepped away, hands trailing along the table edges. The shadows didn't move, but they followed. The whisper faded slowly. Not gone, just quiet, waiting in the corners of the kitchen. Outside, the fog swallowed the mess hall again. The smell of stew lingered faintly on my clothes, clinging to skin and hair. I realized I hadn't been alone. Not in the room, not in the doorway, not ever. The spoon rested upright when I looked back. Still, polish would gleam faintly in the dying light. The whisper had left, but the hum remained, subtle, patient. I walked away. The fog trailed after me, and I could feel more than hear that the mess hall was waiting for the next visitor, or perhaps for me again. The cabin was colder than I expected. Early winter had crept in overnight. Frost pressed against the windows. Pale light sliding across splintered wood. On the desk lay a logbook, leather-cracked, edges curled with age. I opened it slowly. Pages whispered under my fingers, dry and fragile. Names, dates, check-ins, campers arriving, leaving, returning, all recorded in neat, careful handwriting. I leaned closer. The faint smell of ink mixed with old paper and something sharper, metallic, lingered beneath. The further I flipped, the older the entries grew. The ink faded, letters smudged by time, yet still readable. I could feel each hand that had held this book, each breath pressed into the pages. Soft footsteps in the floorboards, a hum beneath the boards. Then the entries shifted. Campers who never left. Names repeated. Notes growing less orderly. Comments about quiet sickness, disappearing meals, dreams that didn't end. The paper carried them, pressed into the fibers. I traced one name, finger trembling. The ink almost felt wet beneath my touch. The air in the cabin thickened. A faint static prickled my arms. I could smell the cold wood, dust, and a trace of something sweet, almost rotting. The room felt crowded, alone, yet full of unseen weight. I reached the final pages. The handwriting changed. Younger, sharper, hurried. Descriptions of campers sitting silently, staring at nothing, refusing to leave. Notes about meals untouched, bunks still warm, shadows watching from corners. The words were alive, shivering. And then, fresh ink, still wet, dark against the faded pages. The last name written there, my own. I froze. The cabin seemed to exhale. A rustling in the corner. Not wind, not leaves. Soft footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the desk. I leaned back. The smell of ink sharpened, metallic, and immediate. The faint hum beneath the floorboards rose, subtle, patient. The frost on the window seemed to crawl toward me, thin and reaching. I flipped back a page, hoping to shake the feeling. The lines blurred, names shifted. Those who had arrived decades ago, still present, still recorded, still waiting. The room remembered them. The air remembered them. And now I was added. A curtain twitched. A shadow brushed the far wall. I could feel breath that wasn't mine, warm against the nape of my neck. The hum dipped, quiet, attentive. I pressed my palm to the desk. The wood was cold, the leather smooth, the ink glistened faintly, and the cabin waited, always waiting. I closed the logbook, but the names lingered behind my eyelids. The smell of ink, the hum, the frost, all clinging. I didn't move. I didn't leave. I just listened. The shadows settled in the corner. The room exhaled softly. Alone, I realized the campers were not gone. Not ever. And the logbook, quiet and patient, waited for the next hand. Mine, waiting. The night was still. Not a leaf moved. Not a branch swayed. Yet the bell tower leaned slightly in the darkness, would groan faintly, stretching against no wind. I could smell damp pine and the faint tang of rust. The path to the tower was slick with dew. Fog curled around my ankles, pressing close, damp and cold. Every step felt heavier than the last. Shadows pulled in the corners of my vision. I reached the base of the tower. The ladders was rough under my fingertips. The silence pressed against my ears. Even my breath sounded loud, too loud, in the still night. Then it struck midnight. A deep toll rolled through the clearing. The bell swayed, slow and deliberate. The sound trembled in the air, hollow and cold, and no wind. No motion, only the bell calling something forward. The vibration hummed through the ground, through my bones. A metallic scent rose, sharp, almost alive. I froze. The tower seemed to watch me. Shadows stretched along the beams, long, patient. Soft footsteps, or something like them, echoed faintly behind the fog. I wanted to turn. I couldn't. The bell tolled again, lower this time. The hum lingered, vibrating through the air, thick and waiting. I smelled the cold metal, the decay of wood, the faint copper of distant blood. The fog shivered around the tower, curling up the beams as if it understood. I pressed my hand to the ladder. It was cold, solid, yet the tower seemed alive, swaying with an unseen rhythm. The bell tolled a third time, and with it, a pause, a silence that pressed on the ears, the chest, the skin. I could feel it then. Eyes in the dark, breath I couldn't see. Soft, patient, waiting just beyond the edge of the fog. The bell called them. I realized, not me, something else. The toll faded slowly, leaving a vibration in the air, lingering in the fog. The tower leaned slightly, then stilled. No wind, no movement, only the hum beneath the boards of the clearing. I stepped back, careful. The dew-slick path caught my boots. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig felt magnified. I smelled the cold pine again, and the faint iron tang of the bell lingering in the night. I looked up at the tower. The bell hung, quiet, patient. Shadows clung to the beams. The fog shifted slowly around its base, reluctant to leave. I realized the toll had not ended. It continued somewhere in the distance, just beyond my sight. Calling, waiting, patient. I walked away, feet careful, silent. The fog followed, brushing against my legs. The bell did not stop, and I understood it had never stopped. It had been calling long before I arrived, and it would call long after I left. The lake lay still. Fog hovered above its surface, pale and thin, curling around the reeds. Even the air felt heavy, quiet, waiting. I stepped onto the shore. The damp grass pressed under my boots. A faint smell of mud and decayed leaves clung to the air. Ripples shifted the reflection of the trees, though the water itself was undisturbed. Then I saw them, figures of children, small and pale in the fog, skipping rocks across the surface. Their laughter was soft, distant, almost swallowed by the mist. I watched them. The stones kissed the water and sank. Ripples spread, but the children's reflections were not there. Nothing at all. The surface held only fog and shadows, bending the trees in pale light. A chill slid across my neck. The air smelled faintly sweet, like soap, and faintly rotten, like forgotten meals. Soft footsteps pressed into the earth behind me. Or maybe it was the wind brushing leaves. I couldn't tell. They moved slowly, methodically, circling the shallow edge, their heads tilted in unison, eyes too bright, too knowing. No splash beyond the stones, no ripples of movement. I crouched closer to the water. The cold seeped into my fingers through wet grass. I traced the smooth surface with my gaze. No reflection. Only fog, only pale light, only absence. The laughter rose slightly. A rhythm, hollow, carried on the damp breeze. I wanted to speak, to ask who they were, but my throat felt thick, the words swallowed by the fog and the water. A ripple passed near my feet, small, deliberate. The children skipped another stone. It curved through the air. The water caught it perfectly, spreading concentric waves. Yet still, nothing mirrored the figures. I noticed their shadows stretching behind them, long and thin, curling against the fog. They moved in ways the children themselves did not. Soft, patient, silent, and then a hum, subtle, low, vibrating beneath the ground and the lake's quiet surface. I stepped back, careful. The damp earth clung to my boots. The children paused, their heads tilting in unison toward me, not threatening, not welcoming, just watching. The mist thickened, ripples faded. The smell of damp grass and old wood filled the air. The lake became a mirror again. Still water, fog pressed low. But the children were gone. Only the faint hum remained. Soft, patient, lingering in the mist. I could feel the emptiness where they had been, heavy in my chest. I left the shore slowly, boots squelching in wet grass. The fog trailed, curling around my legs. I could still feel their eyes. Still hear the faint ripple of stones against a lake that reflected nothing. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Some things wait at the edges of memory. Some things linger in the fog. And the children by the lake were always there. The fog had thickened by the time I reached it. A single cabin, set apart, leaning slightly as though hiding from the others. Chains draped across its door, black and worn. Swinging gently despite still air. I stepped closer. The smell of damp wood rose sharply, mingling with a cold tang of rusted metal. My fingers brushed the chain. It rattled. Alone. No wind. No one else near. The wood was scarred. Scratches clawed inward, not outward, deep and desperate. I traced them with my fingertips, feeling the grooves press into my skin. The wood seemed alive, quivering beneath my touch. I stepped back, boots sinking slightly into wet moss. The chains rattled again. A slow, steady clink like breathing. Shadows clung to the corners of the cabin, stretching against the fog. I wanted to step away. Couldn't. The air grew heavy. Static prickled across my skin. A soft hum rose from beneath the boards. Not loud, just patient, waiting. I crouched to peer under the door. Darkness, thick and unbroken. I could smell damp earth, old wood, and something sharper, metallic, almost alive. I thought I saw a shadow shift inside, but when I blinked, it had vanished. The chains rattled again, faster now, brushing the ground like fingernails. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the sound lingered. The fog outside pressed closer, curling around the cabin. Every tree, every blade of grass felt still, silent, watching. I circled the cabin slowly, careful not to disturb the air. Scratches lined every wall I could see, deeper in some places, almost desperate. The door shivered beneath the chains. I could feel a presence pressing against the other side, patient, cold, waiting. I knelt, rested my hand on the door. The wood was cold, slick with damp. The scratches seemed to pulse faintly beneath my palm. A breath brushed the back of my neck. Warm, wrong, unseen. The chains rattled one last time. The sound echoed across the fog, low and hollow. The hum beneath the boards rose slightly, vibrating through my chest. I realized I could not tell where the cabin ended or where the presence began. I stepped back slowly. The fog curled between the trees, swallowing the cabin in pale light. The scratches remained. The chains remained. The sound of movement lingered, patient and small, like something breathing just beyond the door. I didn't touch it again. I didn't want to. The air clung to me, heavy and damp, carrying the cold tang of iron and old wood. Even walking away, I could feel its weight behind me. The cabin remained. Silent, chained, waiting. The scratches clawing inward. The chains rattling when no one was near. Alone, I realized the presence did not need me to open the door. It had been waiting long before my arrival, and it would wait long after I left. The night pressing close. Fog curled low over the clearing, damp and slow. The air smelled faintly of smoke, sweet and bitter, though no fire had burned here in years. I stepped toward the fire pit. The stones were blackened and cracked, edges worn by time. Yet embers glowed faintly, soft and uneasy, as if breathing. A warmth I didn't feel touched my skin. Shadows gathered along the edges of the pit. Long, thin shapes circling, drifting just beyond the light. Rustling leaves whispered underfoot. I could hear the hum of something beneath the ground. Low, patient, waiting, I knelt by the stones. Fingers brushed the rough edges. Cold, damp, yet the embers pulsed faintly beneath my touch. Not heat, just presence. The smell of smoke sharpened, metallic, clinging to the fog. The shadows shifted closer, not moving like wind or animals. Slow, deliberate, circling the pit in silent rhythm. I felt eyes along my back, gentle but insistent, a breath warm brushing my neck. I leaned forward. The embers glimmered brighter. For a moment, I thought I saw shapes in the flicker, figures sitting, kneeling, watching. I blinked. Nothing remained, only the faint glow and the low hum of the clearing. The air thickened. Every leaf, every stone, every shadow pressed closer. I could feel the presence of something waiting, patient, lingering in the gaps between light and dark. The embers pulsed softly, like slow, careful heartbeats. I rose, careful not to disturb the rhythm. The shadows circled still, pressing into the fog, unseen but certain. The stones glimmered faintly as I stepped back. The cold of the night pressed against my skin. The smell of smoke clung to my hair, to my clothes, to my hands. I looked once more. The embers remained, small and constant, glowing in a hollow pit. Shadows lingered at the edges, patient, slow. I didn't move closer. I didn't need to. The fog drifted around me, curling at my feet. The hum beneath the ground faded slightly, but never left. The fire pit waited. The shadows waited. And I realized some things do not die. I walked away, boots pressed into wet grass. The embers glimmered faintly behind me. The clearing exhaled slowly, and I knew it would not forget. The forest pressed close. Mist curled between the trees, pale and slow. The air smelled of damp earth and fallen pine needles. Then it came, a sharp whistle. High, insistent, slicing through the fog. A counselor calling kids back. I froze. The camp was empty. No voices answered. No footsteps echoed behind the sound. Just a whistle, crisp and clear. It came again, closer this time. I could feel the vibration in my chest, cold and thin. The mist seemed to thicken around me, pressing soft and wet against my skin. Leaves rustled under invisible steps. I tried to move, boots pressed into the damp soil. But every direction felt the same. Fog, shadows, the whistle drawing near. A faint hum under the forest floor rose, low and insistent. The trees swayed, though no wind blew. Shadows stretched long and thin between the trunks. The whistle echoed, closer, deliberate. I realized it circled me, patient, waiting. I bent to look at the forest floor. Twigs, leaves, disturbed as if someone had just passed. But the ground was empty. Nothing left footprints. Nothing moved. And yet the sound pressed closer. I smelled damp wool, faint smoke, the sharp tang of metal. The whistle rose again, higher, insistent, calling. My breath caught. I wanted to answer, to speak, to call back, but my voice was gone. I stepped sideways, careful, soft. Fog brushed my ankles. Branches tapped lightly against each other. Every shadow seemed to lean closer, listening. The whistle paused. The air held its breath. A heartbeat, slow and uneven, hummed beneath my feet. Then it started again, closer. Right behind me, or maybe beside me. I couldn't tell. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave the clearing, the camp, the sound. But the whistle drew me forward, hypnotic, patient. The fog pressed against my face, wet cold, insistent. I turned slowly. Nothing. Only the mist, only the trees, only the echo of the sharp, sharp sound circling me. The forest waited. The air waited. I walked forward, boots pressing into the wet earth, careful, quiet. The whistle followed, patient, always just out of reach. The mist curled around me, brushing against my skin. I felt its weight in my chest, in my throat. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I didn't need to. The whistle had already found me, and the forest held me, still, patient, waiting. The chapel sat at the edge of the clearing. Fog curled around its small steeple, pale and patient. The air smelled of damp wood, dust, and faint wax. I stepped inside. Benches lined the floor, thick with gray dust. Every surface held the weight of years without use. Yet the candle flames flickered, soft, uneven, as though someone had just prayed. I froze. The scent of smoke and wax pressed against my nose. A faint hum vibrated beneath the floorboards. Soft footsteps echoed in the stillness. Or perhaps my own breath carried them. I walked between the benches. Dust shifted under my fingers, fine and cold. The air tasted faintly metallic, like iron. The flames danced, reflecting in the glass of small, stained windows. Shadows stretched along the walls, long and patient. The altar lay at the front, bare except for a single flickering candle. I could feel it watching me. The candle pulsed, gentle, rhythmic, as if marking time not yet past. A draft brushed my cheek, cold and thin, carrying the faint smell of pine and old paper. I knelt briefly, unsure why. Nothing moved, yet everything pressed closer. The hum beneath the floorboards rose, slightly, subtle, insistent. A soft, rustling passed behind the pews. Quiet, patient, deliberate. I rose slowly. The candlelight trembled in response, though no wind disturbed it. Shadows shifted against the walls. I could feel them leaning closer, waiting. The chapel exhaled. Dust settled back into place. The flames flickered once more. The hum faded slightly, but the presence remained. Patient, silent, watching. I stepped back toward the doorway. The fog outside pressed against the glass, curling thinly along the edges. The air smelled of wax and cold wood. The shadows clung to the corners, long and still. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. The chapel waited, as it had waited for years. The candle flames would continue to flicker. The dust would remain thick on the benches, and the hum, quiet beneath the floor, would wait for the next visitor, always patient, always watching. The playground lay at the edge of the clearing. Twilight pressed the trees into long shadows, pale light curling across rusted metal. The air smelled of damp earth and iron. I stepped closer. The swing set moved gently, back and forth, perfect rhythm, though no wind blew. Chains creaked softly, slow and deliberate. The grass beneath my boots was cold and wet. I reached out, brushing a hand along the rusted chain. Metal was rough, cold, and the faint tang of iron lingered in the air. The swing swung on, steady, hypnotic, soft hum of the metal vibrating through the damp air. I sat on one swing. The seat creaked under my weight. It shifted slightly forward, then back. Beside me, the swing next over moved too. Slow, deliberate, a presence. I pressed my hands to the chains, tense. The swing beside me seemed heavier, pressing down as if someone invisible had sat. I felt a cold weight, solid, insistent. The air pressing around me, damp, heavy, carrying the smell of rust and wet leaves. I looked around the playground. Empty. The forest pressed close, fog curling along the ground. Shadows clung to the edges of the swings, long and thin. Every creak, every shift, amplified in the silence. The swing beside me rocked slightly, not with the rhythm of mine, but against it, slow, deliberate, like it had patience. And something waiting. I leaned forward, trying to see. Nothing. The fog curled between the posts. The metal gleamed faintly in the pale light, cold and wet. The hum beneath the earth vibrated through the swing's chains, subtle and constant. I wanted to move, but the weight held me, pressing into my back, into my shoulders. The air felt thick, pressing on my chest. Soft footsteps brushed through the fog, or perhaps the swing itself moved under its own mind. I rocked gently, careful, trying not to disturb it. The invisible weight mirrored my rhythm now. Patient, hollow. The forest waited. The playground waited. Even the fog seemed to hold its breath. I stepped off the swing finally. The weight lifted, leaving the swing to sway gently on its own. The chains creaked hollow in rhythm, though no wind stirred. I smelled damp metal, wet leaves, and something faintly sweet like old soap or forgotten snacks. I walked slowly away, boots pressed into the wet grass. Every swing continued to move, steady, unbroken. The invisible presence remained. Patient, waiting, hollow. The swing set waited for the next hand, the next body, the next weight. And I understood I had not left alone. Some things follow, unseen, patient, in rhythm with empty chains. The shower building sat at the edge of the camp. Fog curled low around the stone steps, cold and damp. The air smelled of mildew and wet tile. I stepped inside. Water dripped endlessly from rusted shower heads. A slow, patient rhythm. Tap, drop, tap, drop. The sound pressed into my chest. Steam hung thick, curling across mirrors coated in condensation. I could see myself pale and stiff, but in the glass, others appeared. Figures faint, just beyond clarity. I blinked. They did not move, or perhaps they moved when I did not look. Soft shadows stretched across the tiles. The smell of wet stone mixed with a faint metallic tang. I stepped closer to the mirrors. Steam pressed against my skin, warm and suffocating. Figures lingered patient, just behind me, though no footsteps echoed. I turned slowly. Nothing, only mirrors and steam. The water dripped in a rhythm that seemed deliberate. Each drop echoed in the empty room. I could feel vibrations in the tiles, beneath my boots, beneath the building. A hum, low, insistent, vibrating with the dripping. I raised my hand. The mirrors rippled slightly beneath my fingertips. The figures grew clearer for a moment. Children, small, faceless in the mist, standing too still. I could smell faint soap, faint mildew, the damp of bodies long gone. I turned to leave. The drip followed, slow, steady, an echo that pressed against my back, waiting. The figures shifted just enough to remain in the corner of my vision. I stepped back, careful. Tiles were slick beneath my boots. Steam swirled around me, thick and wet. The mirrors reflected not only the room, but the presence behind it. Always patient, always watching. I paused at the doorway. The drip, the hum, the cold air pressing in from outside. Figures lingered in the mirrors, faint, patient. The water dripped on. The air smelled of damp stone and the faint tang of metal. I didn't look back again. The echo followed, though silent outside my ears. I could feel it pressing in the spaces between light and shadow. The showers waited, and I understood that some presence never left. The old campfire circle lay at the edge of the clearing. Ashes scattered across the stones, gray and cold. The air smelled faintly of smoke, charred wood, and damp earth. I stepped closer. Footprints marked the ground, bare, fresh, pressing into the soft soil. They led into the forest, careful, deliberate. Every step pressed silence into the clearing. I followed slowly. Fog curled between the trees, cold and wet against my skin. The forest smelled of moss and fallen pine needles, faintly metallic. The footprints continued, each one deeper than the last. Then they stopped, abruptly. No trace beyond the last print. Only fog, trees, and the hush of the forest holding its breath. I leaned closer to the ashes. They clung to the stones, fine and brittle. A faint hum rose beneath the ground. The air pressing against my chest, heavy and patient. I stepped forward, boots sinking into damp soil. The forest held shadows between the trunks, long and still. Rustling leaves whispered against each other. I could feel eyes along the edges of the fog, patient, waiting. I bent to trace the last footprint. Cold, soft, damp soil clinging to my fingertips. It felt wrong, alive somehow, pressing into the earth. A shiver ran up my spine. The clearing exhaled. The fog curled tighter, pressing between the trees. The ashes shimmered faintly in pale light. The footprints gone beyond reach, yet somehow present. Patient, silent. I didn't move further into the forest. I didn't need to. The last print remained, holding its weight in the clearing. The hum beneath the ground lingered. The forest waited, still and silent, for what had vanished. I turned slowly. Ashes stirred slightly under the faint breeze. The air smelled of smoke and damp wood. Every shadow pressed closer, holding the pause, the hush. The clearing waited. The footprints waited. And I realized that some presence leaves only traces and nothing else. The sun sank low behind the trees. Shadows stretched across the clearing, long and pale. The air smelled of damp leaves and fading sunlight. Then I heard it. Soft, faint voices, singing from the woods. Children or something like them, high and clear, fragile. The notes lingered in the fog, curling around my ankles, brushing my cheeks. I stepped closer to the tree line. Grass pressed wet beneath my boots. The song grew louder, richer, wrapping the forest in sound. I could feel it vibrating in my chest, soft and insistent. Branches swayed gently, though no wind stirred. Leaves rustled, small whispers blending with the song. The fog thickened, curling between trunks. It smelled faintly sweet, like warm earth and old pine sap. I paused. The song changed. Harmonies rose and fell, looping, patient, deliberate. The trees seemed to hum along, subtle vibrations through bark and root. The air pressed against my skin, warm and damp, alive with sound. I walked slowly, careful. Each step pressed into soft earth, each footfall a quiet echo. The voices followed, circling, weaving through the branches behind and ahead. Shadows leaned closer, long and patient. I knelt briefly beside a fallen log. The earth smelled of moss and wet wood. The voices swelled, insistent, calling, pulling me forward. I could feel the vibrations beneath my hands, in the roots, in the stones hidden by moss. I looked up. The sunlight dimmed, pale and thin. Branches trembled as though humming with the song. The fog swirled around me, wrapping my legs, brushing my face. The voices rose, louder, soft but insistent, echoing endlessly through the trees. I wanted to follow, step into the sound, but the forest held me in place. The shadows pressed, patient and patient. The song circled, wrapping the clearing, vibrating in the soil and the bark. I stepped back slowly. Grass and leaves brushed against my boots. The song softened, receding slightly but never leaving. The hum in the trees remained, faint, insistent, alive. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The voices lingered, patient, echoing through every branch, every root, every shadow. The clearing waited. The sun sank fully behind the trees, and the song continued. The cabin sat alone at the edge of the woods. Fog curled along the ground, wet and slow. The air smelled faintly of pine, old paper, and something sweet, like ink still drying. I pushed the door open. Hinges creaked, protesting. Inside, piles of letters were stacked across the table, on chairs, even spilling onto the floor. The wood smelled of damp, aged walls and the faint tang of metal nails. I picked one up. The ink was fresh, dark against the thin paper. The date impossible. Days, even hours old, though the cabin had been abandoned for decades. I traced the words with my fingertips. Lines written in careful loops, small and childlike. The paper felt warm, as if it had just been set down. A faint hum vibrated beneath the floorboards, soft, insistent. I stepped back. Shadows pressed into the corners of the cabin, long and patient. The wind, or something like it, brushed against my neck, though the windows were closed. The letters rustled slightly, as if alive, breathing with me. I opened another. The words spoke of homesickness, small fears, and the longing for a parent. The voice was tender, real, yet out of place in the quiet cabin. I could smell the faint tang of wax seals and the sharp edge of ink. I knelt to the floor. More piles, letters stacked carefully, patient, waiting. Some spilled over like fallen leaves, curling at the edges. The faint hum under the floor swelled slightly, vibrating through my boots into my chest. I wondered how they could be here, How could ink be fresh? How could words be written for parents who had long gone, in a camp abandoned for decades? The cabin seemed to hold its breath, waiting for me to understand. I stood slowly. A draft moved through the room, carrying the faint rustle of paper. The shadows shifted, stretching along the walls, long and patient. The hum beneath my feet remained, subtle, alive. I touched another letter, careful. The words were familiar, tender, filled with hope and small confessions. I felt the warmth of the paper through my fingertips. It was as if the letters were still being written, even without a hand. I stepped back toward the door. The fog pressed at the windows, thick and curling. The letters lay in piles, patient, waiting for someone to read them. The hum beneath the floorboard followed me as I left. Outside, the wind, or absence of it, pressed against my face. I glanced back once. The cabin remained still, quiet, alive with words I could not comprehend. The letters waited, and I understood that some messages never leave. They wait, patient, for someone to hear them. Beneath the main hall, a narrow stairwell descended into shadow. The air smelled of cold stone and dust, damp and heavy. Each step echoed softly, pressed against the walls like a held breath. I reached the bottom. A door waited, wood old and worn, locked tight. No windows, no light, only darkness. I pressed my ear to the door. Steady breathing came from within, slow, measured, alive, patient. The air in the stairwell grew colder, pressing against my skin. The fog curled faintly from the cracks around the door. It smelled faintly metallic, faintly damp, faintly alive. I traced the edges of the wood with my fingertips. Rough, worn, warm in places, cold in others. The breath inside grew louder when I held still. It pressed against me in the dark, patient and silent. I stepped back slightly. The silence around me deepened, heavy, almost physical. Even my own breath seemed to echo in the small stairwell. Shadows pressed close along the stone walls. I could hear faint rustling from inside, not movement of objects, but of something patient. The sound pressed into the soles of my boots. Every vibration felt deliberate, waiting. I leaned closer. The air from the room whispered cold against my cheeks. The steady breathing, slow and alive, pressed into my chest. It carried a faint hum beneath it, deep and insistent. I wanted to leave, but something held me, curious, compelled. The shadows stretched along the walls, long and patient. The hum beneath the breathing thrummed through the stone, subtle, constant. I rested a hand on the doorknob. Cold metal, rough from age. The breath inside grew slightly faster. I could feel its weight pressing against the door, patient, alive. I stepped back again. The stairwell exhaled with the shadows, fog curling higher. The darkness inside the room remained absolute. No windows, no light, only the steady, insistent breathing. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The presence pressed into the walls, the air, the stones. Patient, waiting. I climbed the stairs slowly. Fog swirled around my boots, cold against my skin. The shadows remained at the edges, lingering, patient. The breathing beneath the door continued, steady. Outside, the hall seemed lighter, though not much. The air still smelled of stone and damp, but less oppressive. I glanced once at the locked door. The windowless room waited, patient and alive, and I understood that some darkness never leaves. The front gate of the camp stands silent in the fading light. Chains hang loosely, swinging slightly in the still air. Fog curls around the posts, thick and cold against my skin. At night, the gate moves, slowly, without touch. A creak drifts into the clearing, carried by the still air. I hold my breath. A figure waits beyond the gate, pale, shaped like a child, or not quite, standing perfectly still, patient. The air smells faintly of earth and wet leaves. I step closer. The fog presses between the bars, soft, curling around my ankles. The ground hums faintly beneath my boots, subtle, insistent. The figure does not move, but I can feel its attention, pressing quietly, endlessly. The wind does not blow. Branches brush together somewhere deep in the trees. The gate sways again. Slow, deliberate, unnatural. I feel in my chest the pull of its presence. I peer past the bars. Shadows cling to the figure, stretching and flickering with the pale light. The eyes, or hollows, look at me without blinking. The fog shifts, thickening, swallowing the path beyond. I hear static in the hush, a vibration, almost a whisper. I step back. Soft footsteps press against the damp earth behind me. I don't turn. The figure remains beyond the gate, patient, waiting. The gate creaks again, swinging inward slightly, then still. The chains rattle, though no hand moves them. The pale figure shifts just enough to remind me it is alive, or aware. The fog curls tighter, damp against my skin. I breathe slowly. The air tastes faintly metallic, heavy with quiet. Every shadow presses closer, but the clearing remains empty. The hum beneath the earth persists, low and constant. I take one last step back. The figure at the gate does not follow. It waits, patient, relentless. The chain sways softly in its presence, keeping time with a silence that stretches beyond the clearing. I leave the path and walk toward the hall. Fog clings to my boots, cold against my calves. Behind me, the gate waits. The figure waits. And I know, even as the darkness thickens, it will be there again tonight. The path through the woods was quiet. Fog lay heavy over the roots and stones, damp against my boots. The air smelled of moss and old pine, sharp and cold. I saw it then. A backpack, abandoned in the dirt. The straps were twisted, mud clinging to the edges. Inside, snacks and small toys lay neatly untouched. I knelt beside it. The fabric smelled faintly of earth and something sweeter, paper, crayons, wax. A name tag dangled from the zipper. I recognized it from the logbook, written decades ago. The air pressing close. Shadows clung to the trees, long and patient. The fog curled between my fingers as I touched the strap, soft, damp, alive. I lifted the flap. Crackers still sealed. A small plastic toy, shiny, unbroken. It was as if no one had touched it for years. And yet, the colors were bright. Fresh. I stepped back slowly. The hum of the forest felt heavier here. Subtle, low, pressing. Branches swayed, even though the air was still. Somewhere far off, a bird called once, faint, and then silence swallowed it. I traced the letters on the name tag. Familiar. Tiny loops precise. A hand long gone, yet remembered. I could feel the weight of years pressing to fog, through the air, through the dirt beneath my boots. I imagined the camper, small hands, hesitant, careful, stepping through these woods. I imagined their laughter, muffled by the trees. The bag left behind, waiting, patient. A rustling sound pressed at the edges of the clearing. Not movement of leaves, but of something attentive. The air smelled warmer suddenly, faintly sweet, as if the bag exhaled. I pressed my fingers to it again. Cold, yet alive. I could hear faint breathing around me. Not mine. Slow, steady, patient. The fog thickened, swirling around my boots, crawling up my calves. I stepped away. The bag remained, pale in the gray light of the fog, untouched and waiting. The hum beneath the earth felt sharper, deeper, insistent. I glanced back once. The forest held its breath. The bag lay still, patient, keeping the camper's memory alive. And I understood that some things wait forever. Fog lay heavy across the clearing. The ground was damp, cold against my boots. The trees shivered quietly, though no wind moved through their branches. A whistle cut through the silence. High, sharp, insistent. I froze. Through the gray haze, I saw him, tall, uniformed, standing perfectly still. The fog clung to his boots, coiling around his legs like smoke. His shoulders were broad, stiff, precise. And when I looked at his face, nothing. Smooth, pale blank. No eyes, no mouth. Just a uniform, the posture, the whistle. The air pressed close, heavy and damp. I could feel my heartbeat echo in my ears, slow and loud. Every breath carried the scent of wet pine and something faintly metallic. He blew the whistle again, closer this time. The echo stretched across the trees, bouncing and lingering. The fog shifted, brushing against my arms, curling around my fingers. I stepped back, careful, silent. The earth hummed faintly beneath me. The whistle echoed again, but the sound was closer and further. The space between us warped in the gray light. I blinked. He had not moved. And yet, each time the whistle sounded, I felt him nearer, a weight pressing in, gentle but unstoppable. I tried to move to the path. Feet heavy, wet leaves stuck to my soles. Branches brushed my shoulders, soft yet insistent. The whistle came again, low, insistent, demanding. I looked up. The counselor remained still. Uniform neat, stance perfect, face blank. The fog wrapped around him, thick, choking, and endless. I swallowed. The cold pressed through my clothes, seeped into my chest. Every shadow seemed to lean toward him, gathering, patient. The whistle faded, but the presence did not. I stepped back into the clearing's edge. Soft footsteps pressed behind me, though no one moved. The fog shifted, carrying the faint smell of damp earth and something faintly sweet, like pencil shavings and paper long forgotten. The counselor did not follow. He remained in the fog, watching, waiting. And I understood. Not every figure fades when you turn away. I left the clearing, boots wet, breath shallow. The whistle did not sound again, but I felt him there. The fog held him, patient. And I knew he would always be waiting, somewhere between the gray, where the whistle lingers. The hall smelled faintly of dust and varnish. Sunlight struggled through the high windows, pale and thin. The floorboards creaked softly under my boots, each step careful, deliberate. A hum settled in the air, soft, almost musical. I glanced around. The radio was broken, wires bare and still. Shadows stretched across the walls, long, thin, twisting. They moved faster than I did, faster than the slow rhythm of my breath. I stopped. The air pressed close. It smelled faintly of wax and something metallic, sharp, like pennies left in the rain. The hum deepened, vibrating under my feet. A shadow detached itself from the far corner, slipping along the wall like smoke. I felt it before I saw it. Cold, lightless, brushing my arm. Goose flesh rose. I tried to turn, step back. The shadows followed. Faster, fluid, impossible corner. The hum filled my ears, pulsing with each heartbeat. I caught sight of the floor, where the shadows crossed. The wood gleamed wet. I knelt, fingertips brushing it. Cold, damp, no explanation. Soft footsteps echoed behind me. I spun, nothing. The shadows moved alone. Faster now, darting across the walls, pooling beneath the broken lights. I breathed slowly. The hum softened, layered now with a faint undertone. Laughter, quiet, hollow. I didn't recognize it, yet it felt familiar, insistent. The shadows bent toward the sound, stretching long, dark, eager. I reached for the door, with cold under my palm. The shadows twisted, reaching higher than before. I felt the air thicken. A soft static brushed against my skin. I opened the door slowly. The hum faded, the shadows retreating just out of reach. The hall lay still, empty again. Dust motes floated in the pale sunlight. I looked back once. The shadows lingered near the walls, patient, waiting. The hum echoed softly, like a memory that refuses to leave. And I knew if I returned, they would be there again, moving faster than me, always closer than I expected. The night was still. A thin fog lingered among the pines, curling around trunks like breath. I walked slowly, boots soft against damp earth, the smell of moss and wet bark pressing close. Moonlight filtered through the branches. It caught on something sharp, pale. Initials carved deep into the trees, edges glinting like they were cut just now. I paused. The cuts were fresh. A faint warmth radiated from them, almost imperceptible under my fingertips. A shiver ran up my arm. I traced one, JS, the same initials I'd seen in the logbook. Another ML, another name from decades past. Recognition twisted in my chest. These weren't just marks. They were records. A soft rustle brushed past. Leaves shifted in the fog, whispering. I froze. The trees seemed to lean closer, watching, waiting. The initials glowed a pale light, dim but persistent. Some of the carvings were new, some older, faded. Together, they formed a web of names, a map of those who had passed here, or never left. I touched another tree, Rough bark pressed into my palm. Beneath it, the cut was warmer, pulsing softly, like a heartbeat slowed to the rhythm of the woods. I tried to step back. The fog thickened around my ankles, wrapping tight. Branches scratched my arms gently, almost like warning touches. The hum of the forest shifted, low and hollow. I glanced up. Shadows moved between the trees. Slender, pale, unformed. They mirrored the shapes of the carvings, leaning, stretching, reaching toward the moonlight. My breath came shallow. Each exhale fogged the space between the trunks. The initials seemed to flicker in response. Some glimmered brighter as I passed. Others faded into darkness. I stumbled over a root. The fog swallowed the sound. Silence returned. Yet the glowing letters persisted, patient, alive. A faint rustle above drew my gaze. Moonlight caught the tops of the trees. Branches bore no leaves, only carvings, names layered atop names, decades pressing into the bark. I realized the carvings weren't just names. They were echoes. I stepped back, hesitant. The glow dimmed as I retreated, but never fully vanished. Every name from the logbook I had touched that night was here. Every lost camper's mark lingered, etched in pale moonlight. I felt eyes, or something like eyes, following me. Not human, not fully. The fog thickened, wrapping my shoulders, my legs, my chest. I could hear a soft hum rising from the earth, vibrating through the soles of my boots. I moved toward the path, trying not to look. The trees seemed to sigh as I passed. Leaves quivered, initials flickering faintly, a pulse like a warning or greeting. When I reached the edge of the woods, the fog thinned. The moonlight was colder, pale and distant. The trees behind me stood silent. The carvings glimmered faintly, just enough to remember. I didn't look back. I only felt the weight of the names. The forest kept them waiting, and I knew they were still watching. The night pressed close. A low fog pooled along the dirt trail, curling between roots and rocks. The air smelled damp, faintly a pine, and earth turned cold. I heard at first a steady rhythm, soft footsteps marching forward. Alone, I followed, my boots muffled by the dirt and fallen leaves. The trail stretched ahead, pale under the moonlight. Shapes moved in a haze. Figures emerged, children, teenagers. Some I recognized from the logbook, others unknown. Their eyes were closed. No one spoke. They walked in silence, arms loose at their sides, heads tilted slightly downward. The footsteps never faltered. Each step pressed into the dirt with careful weight. A hum of life, or something like life, vibrated beneath their movement. The fog carried it, weaving it through the trees. I slowed. A branch scraped my shoulder. The sound echoed strangely, swallowed by the hush around them. They did not see me. They did not hear me. The moon glinted on pale hair, damp clothes clinging to slender frames. The air was cool on my skin, tinged with a faint scent of moss and cold metal, perhaps forgotten bells from the camp. Every footfall left a print in the soft dirt. I bent to look. They vanished before I could trace them. I followed deeper. The trail curved, disappearing into a line of dense trees. Each figure walked as if pulled by something unseen. Their breathing was quiet, rhythmic. So even it seemed to belong to the earth itself. A soft rustling came from the underbrush. I froze. The campers did not stop. They passed me as if I were part of the fog. Their footsteps whispered over fallen leaves, soft and hollow. A faint smell of smoke drifted along the trail. Embers, long dead, lingered in the soil. I caught the scent of pine sap, bitter and sticky, under the chill of the night air. The figures did not notice it. The path narrowed. Their shadows stretched and trembled across the trunks of the trees. Some bent unnaturally as they passed. The branches seemed to reach for them, brushing fingertips against sleeves, hair. But the campers remained unaware. I hesitated. The footsteps continued ahead, drawing me forward. Each one led deeper into the woods, further from the edge of the camp. The fog thickened around my ankles, curling into a cold, damp embrace. I whispered a name from the logbook. No answer came. Their eyes remained closed. And yet, I felt a pull, a quiet insistence, like the forest itself was breathing them forward. A clearing appeared. The trail ended in a circle of old stones. The campers stopped here, in perfect formation, still, silent, their eyes shut. The ground beneath them hummed, faint, vibrating through my shoes. I stepped closer. The fog swirled around me, brushing cold against my cheeks. I could feel the earth pulse beneath the stones, beneath their feet. The circle seemed endless, echoing their footsteps backward, forward, forever. I wanted to leave, but my legs refused. I was caught between watching and becoming part of it. The figures blinked once, or at least I thought they might have. Their closed eyes held a weight beyond sleep, a pull of the past, the lost, the forgotten. The fog rolled thicker. I turned back, trailing the footprints. The path behind was empty. The trail led forward, always forward, swallowed by night. And in the quiet, the footsteps continued. Even as I walked away, my own boots soft against dirt, I could hear them marching endlessly to the fog, eyes closed, unseen but always there. The cabin smelled of damp wood and dust. The floorboards groaned softly beneath my boots. Outside, the wind whispered through bare branches, brushing the walls with faint hums. I noticed it immediately, a cracked mirror leaning in the corner. The frame was splintered, pale against the shadows. The glass caught the weak moonlight, reflecting more than just a room. I stepped closer. My reflection blinked and lingered. A small, unnatural smile curved across its face. I didn't move. My breath caught in my chest. The air smelled faintly of smoke and something sweeter, like melted wax or honey. Cold touched my fingertips as I reached toward the glass. It didn't move with me. I raised a hand. The reflection's hand stayed lowered, resting casually at its side. A faint creak echoed behind me. I spun. Empty walls. Shadows clung to the corners, pale and static. The reflection smiled wider. It tilted its head slowly, watching me with eyes that didn't blink. I felt a pull, soft and insistent, like the fog outside pressing against the cabin walls. I stepped back. The floor shivered beneath my weight. The mirror seemed to breathe, or perhaps it was I. Cold sweat ran down my neck, clinging to my hair. I tried to look away. The room felt smaller, tighter, walls leaning inward. The smell of wax and smoke thickened, curling into my lungs. I heard a faint hum, or perhaps it was my own heartbeat. A shadow flickered across the cracked glass. Not mine. The reflection moved independently, swaying slightly, smiling still. The edges of the glass shimmered, bending the cabin into a subtle warped shape. I reached out again. This time, it mimicked me for a moment, but too slowly, too deliberately. Then the smile returned, wider, heavier. I could almost feel its weight in the room, pressing down, suffocating. I wanted to leave. The door was across the cabin, pale under the moonlight streaming through the window. Each step felt sluggish, as if the floor itself resisted me. The reflection didn't blink. It didn't breathe. It just watched. The wind outside rose. The walls shivered with faint rustling, carrying the scent of pine and cold earth. The mirror flickered in the pale light, as if the glass were liquid. I saw myself, or the idea of myself, stretching, bending unnaturally inside the frame. I froze. A soft whisper touched my ear. Or perhaps it came from the glass itself. Indistinct, indecipherable. I could see the cracks in the mirror more clearly now. Each fracture distorted the reflection in tiny, sinister ways. The smile shifted from playful to knowing, almost cruel. I felt it studying me, waiting. I turned fully toward the door. It groaned as I pushed it open. Fresh air rushed in, smelling of wet grass and night fog. For a moment, I thought I had escaped, but the mirror remained behind me. The reflection lingered, smiling still. Even as I backed out of the cabin, the smile followed me. Outside, the fog swallowed the cabin. Its outline blurred, edges soft and wet. I heard a faint scraping, like fingernails against wood. The mirror waited, and somewhere beneath the fog and the night, it watched. The first light of dawn brushed pale over the lake. Mist hovered low, curling across the still water like smoke. No birds called. No leaves rustled. The cabin sat in silence. Wood gleamed faintly in the new light, cold and wet with dew. Footsteps felt heavy against the frozen ground. Every breath fogged in the air. I walked along the shore. The water didn't ripple, not a single wave. Even the reeds refused to sway. A soft smell of damp earth rose. The air was thick, heavy with frost and fog. I could hear my own heart, steady, hollow. Then whispers, faint at first, a single syllable brushing my ears. My name. I stopped. The whispers faded, then returned, gentler, closer, threading through the silence. I wanted to answer, but the sound of my own voice felt wrong in that frozen morning. I looked around. No one moved. The cabin stood empty, doors closed. Shadows clung to corners, long and pale in the weak light. The lake mirrored nothing. Not sky, not trees, not me. A breeze stirred, or something pretending to be a breeze. The whispers sharpened, cold against my neck, soft fingers brushing my spine. I stepped closer to water's edge. Every blade of grass seemed frozen mid-shiver. The reflection of the sky shimmered faintly, but no movement below. The whispers grew, layering together. Echoes of my own name, distorted, endless. I held my breath. The frost nipped my fingertips. I could smell pine and wet moss. The whispers circled me, coming from everywhere and nowhere. I turned. Nothing. The camp felt abandoned and alive all at once. Every cabin, every tree, every stone seemed aware. The stillness pressed against me. Every step I took made no sound, though the ground was soft with dew. A low hum joined the whispers, subtle, vibrating in my chest, a resonance that I couldn't place. The fog thickened, curling around my legs like slow hands. I crouched by the lake. Water held my reflection, but it wavered, shifting too slowly, almost alive. A faint ripple, though nothing touched it. The whispers softened, drawing me closer. I wanted to run. My legs wouldn't obey. Only the hum and my name, a rhythm that made my teeth ache. Then silence, complete. The world held its breath. Even the fog seemed to pause. I left the shore, stepping lightly. The cabins remained still, the trees unmoving. Yet I could still feel the presence in the air. A final whisper brushed past my ear, a sound like someone breathing my name from inside my own chest. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The dawn grew pale, and the lake stayed mirror still. The camp waited, and I walked through the silence, alone. The moon hung low over the camp, pale and cold. Fog drifted between the cabins, soft against the skin. The air smelled faintly with smoke and damp earth. One cabin glowed dimly. A single candle flickered inside, throwing shadows across the walls. I approached slowly. Every step pressed into the soft, still ground, but made no sound. The door creaked when I nudged it. Inside, a camper sat on the bed, still, eyes fixed forward, unblinking. The room smelled faintly of wax and old linen. I stepped closer. The candlelight cast the camper's shadow long across the floor. It didn't move. It felt suspended, like time itself held its breath. I breathed. The smell of damp pine drifted in from the cracked window. The candle flickered again, and the shadows stretched. A hum rose somewhere deep beneath the floorboards, beneath the walls. I blinked, and the bed was empty. Nothing. Only the faint scent of candle wax lingered. I stepped closer. Every creak of the floor felt loud, echoing in the stillness. The fog pressed against the cabin walls, cold, moist. My own reflection danced in the small glass of the candle holder. It trembled. I whispered, though no sound should have left my lips. The camper should have been there, but only empty bed covers lay beneath the candlelight. I moved around the room slowly. The shadows shifted. The hum lingered. It was in the floor. It was in the walls. It was in my chest. The candle guttered, flickered, and the camper's form appeared again, sitting forward, eyes fixed. But when I blinked, gone again. The room smelled of smoke, old blankets, and something metallic, something quiet, just beneath the surface of the air. I leaned close to the bed. Cold touched my fingertips, but there was nothing to hold. I tried to steady my breathing. Each inhale felt like dragging the fog deeper into my lungs. Each exhale left the candlelight trembling. The stillness pressed down. I couldn't tell where the cabin ended and the night began. A soft rustle from the corner. I turned. Shadows pooled there. The candle flickered. The camper's eyes fixed on me for a fraction of a second, then vanished. I stepped back. The door groaned as I shifted weight. The fog outside had grown thick, curling against the walls, seeping beneath the cracks. The candlelight quivered, almost alive. I wanted to leave. Every instinct pulled me toward the door, but the stillness inside held me, and the hum continued, soft, steady, like someone breathing beside me, though no one was there. I blinked. The bed was empty. The candle swayed, as if disturbed by a presence unseen. I could feel it, watching, waiting, patient. The night lingered. The candle guttered again, shadows dancing in impossible ways. The room smelled of cold wax, linen, and something older. I stepped back slowly, careful not to disturb the air. The cabin waited. The fog waited. The last camper waited. And I left. Outside, the moon was pale over the still camp. Every cabin was silent, every tree frozen in place. And the hum, faint beneath my feet, followed me into the night.